This is my partner's desk. It comprises of a piece of scrap plywood, two IKEA metal trestle legs, and it is simply not fit for purpose. They can't fit their legs underneath there. They can barely fit their laptop on top of that desk. And given how disruptive I've been in this room the past couple months, they deserve a lot better. So in this video, we're gonna give this corner an enormous glow up. Firstly, I'm gonna make a new desktop that perfectly fits this corner shape and get rid of the trestle legs. It'll be supported on little cleats all the way around. I'm going to mount the monitor to the wall. We're gonna add some floating shelves above to store their comic books. And I'm also gonna make a few fun organizational and decorational DIYs. Let's start by cleaning out this corner and taping up where we want the desk to be, where we're gonna position the monitor, and then where we're gonna put the shelves as well. Then we can get some really accurate measurements, including all of the angles, so that we can make everything fit just right. Hello and welcome to the workshop and my new hairdo. Now we have the exact dimensions of all the pieces we can get to building, starting with the desktop. The desk is going to be a trapezoidal shape to fit into that corner, so I've drawn that out on this bit of plywood. For the design, I really like the look of end grain butcher blocks. It's a view of wood we don't get to see very often, and you can make really cool patterns out of them. So I wanted to do that for this, but in my research, I found that there's a reason why people don't make desks out of end grain. It needs to be a very thick slab for it to be stable, and if it's on something unsupported like a desk, it's just not practical. But I think you can avoid issues with wood movement if you make the slices quite thin and then mount them to a substrate, so basically treating them as a veneer. I haven't seen many people attempt this, so it might be quite hard to finish properly, or it might kind of disintegrate over time, I'm not sure, but we're going to try and we can always deal with those problems later. We wanted like a mid to dark tone wood for his desk, and since we only need a small volume to cover this, I bought a little chunk of walnut for it. I had a really tough time cutting the slices on my table saw, and then I found a really good deal on a bandsaw on Marketplace, which is something I've wanted for quite a while. I picked that up yesterday, and that made easy work of slicing the pieces down. And also because the blade is much thinner on a bandsaw, it's using up less material, so I have more to play with. I cut around 60 slices, and they're all around 2.5 mil thick, and these are in the order that I cut them. So I want to lay them out on the board in the order I cut them, so that if there's any kind of variation in grain across the thing, it will look kind of consistent and not very patchy. I'm not sure if it'll matter at all, but I may as well keep them in order if I can. After I decided on a brick pattern, I laid out all of my pieces and taped every single seam so I could glue it down as one big sheet. Okay, I've had a bit of a panic. I left the tabletop to dry over the weekend, and I came in today and unclamped it all, and it didn't go great. I decided to do the only thing I thought I could do, which is shove a whole load more glue into the crevices where I thought I could, and clamp it again and see how we do. As long as they're stuck down, I should be able to sand the top and make it smooth. But I don't know, this project might just be a complete failure. Every time I make something, I am doing something brand new to me because I find it really boring to do stuff I already know how to do, which means despite how much research you do and how much prep you do, there's just always going to be setbacks, and that's fine. Everything is overcomable if you have enough time and motivation. Okay, now we've had that pity party and we need to wait a couple of days to see if this is salvageable. Let's move on to the floating shelves. I bought 3 planks of American poplar, which is a hardwood that has a kind of green tinge, so it's not very attractive on its own, but apparently it takes paint really well, and that's what I'm going to use it for. So each of these are 1 inch thick. I'm going to cut them down to size now. I bought this floating shelf hardware, which doesn't look too heavy duty, but hopefully it will be significant enough. So I need to drill a hole in the back of the shelves and root out a space for this to sit flush. And then I will be able to screw this into the wall and just hopefully slide the shelves on. I'm planning on painting these shelves the same color as the walls, but in a gloss finish. So they're not gonna stand out very much, but I always want to do something a little special. So I'm going to root out a detail on the front edge of each shelf. There's a designer called Nicola Harding, and she has this one dining table that I'm absolutely obsessed with. I just think it's so perfect, and I've been thinking, can I make that or something similar to that? Maybe someday. But it has this detail around the edge of the dining table that I think looks really beautiful. Instead of boxing it out, I think I'm going to use a beading router bit to kind of make a rounded space over it and then cut out the inside section. Hello, making these shelves the other day went well. There were a couple bits where the router veered a little bit and cut into the beading. So on 2 sections, I had to slice out the section of beading and replace it with some spare bits. But I glued that in, I filled it and sanded it, and now I don't think it'll be noticeable. So now I have to face the desktop and see whether it's good enough to proceed with. It has been 3 days and there is still some wet glue here. All the pieces on the front seem nicely glued down. There's still a little bit of play in the middle, but I think we're just going to live with that. I'm going to get some low grit sandpaper and see if we can get this a bit smoother, and then we will talk next steps. Things have gone from bad to worse with this project. After sanding it, I still wasn't quite happy. It was still feeling a bit spongy in the middle, so I decided to try and fill all the cracks with resin, and that somehow made things worse. So I decided to give up entirely and start a new piece from scratch, which also catastrophically failed at the gluing stage. I thought I had enough clamping pressure, but it turns out basically, unless you have a very expensive vacuum press, it's just impossible to do end grain veneer. I'll be talking much more about this entire process and sharing a lot more footage on the after show on Patreon, but it is time to cut my losses and pivot to a simpler idea. I have a sheet of walnut veneered MDF, and I did have it in mind for a different project, but we're just going to cut into it now. The new plan is much less interesting. It's just to use this for the desktop. Although this is only 10mm MDF, which won't be solid enough for the table. So I'm going to have to double it up and glue it together. Pray for me that that glue up works. In my first attempts, I had to use a lot of maths and angles to try and draw out the trapezoid perfectly. This time, I worked smarter, not harder, and I made myself a template just out of paint stirrers and hot glue. This is literally the shape of the wall, so I can't go wrong. I'm going to try and find the area with the nicest grain for us to use as the top, and then I will flip the template round, and that will be the base. I have this solid strip of walnut that I'm going to glue to the front as an apron, which will hide the veneer and give it a bit more stability. Okay, this is going to be our top, this is going to be our base, and we're going to glue them together like so. But firstly, I'm actually going to cut the underside to the exact dimensions I want, because I want them inset a little bit from the top of the desk, and I'll explain why. So the desk is going to be sitting on these cleats on the wall. These are just some strips of pine that I tried to stain with a walnut stain, and it's taken it very poorly. I might have to sand these down and redo them. If I have a little lip when I glue them together, this can sit underneath that lip and just protrude less from the underside, basically. This is so dusty. I should have been wearing a mask. I'm sorry. Okay, now I'm going to spend some time preparing for this glue up by making some cauls that will run underneath and on top of the piece and be clamped at both ends, and that will provide some clamping pressure in the middle of the piece. I'm now very nervous about gluing, but there is no reason why this shouldn't work. While our desktop is drying, let's move on to other things. So you've seen these shelves before. I've done a bit more work on them since then. I have primed them and I have done one coat of paint on one side, and now I'm going to do one coat of paint on the other side. This is gloss paint. I want a high gloss finish just for a bit of sort of textural contrast, but it might take a few layers to build up to get it nice and smooth. You may be thinking, doing it with a paintbrush isn't going to make it all smooth and stroke free, and that is correct. But painting with a roller in here is a bit of a pain because I have to walk ages to clean it, and with this I can just cling film it and wash it at home. So that's why I'm doing it in what seems like a counterintuitive amount of effort way. But it's also quite soothing, isn't it? Just to paint something simple with a brush. Just me and the work. Obviously the top edge is what I want to look the smoothest and sexiest, so I'm going to give that as many coats as I can. Now we can move on to our third project of the day, which is this corkboard. B really wanted somewhere that he could put postcards and little mementos and stuff as a form of decoration, and I already happen to have this one, so I thought we could repurpose it, but it is not the most beautiful thing ever. So I'm going to paint the actual cork bit, our house white, so that will match the architrave around the doors, and I also want to replace the frame. Let's see if I can take off this frame without hurting the cork. Okay, now we can decide on a new frame, and I have something very exciting to show you. I am a Facebook Marketplace fiend. I'm constantly scrolling Marketplace for anything and everything. And one day I came across someone that was selling up all of their framing supplies. So they were just like a hobbyist framer, and they had like 40 odd lengths of framing timber. I don't even know the actual words for these things because I'm obviously not a framer. The beautiful ornate moldings that you make frames out of, they had 40 of them that were all around 3 meters long, and they sold them to me for 40 quid. And the other week I bought this whiteboard and drove a bunch of nails into it and cut off little samples of all of my lengths and wrote down how much I had of each of them so I can keep track without having to like constantly dip into my stash. So I have a lovely bevy of options here to choose from. Because it's gonna be white on the inside, I'm inclined to go for something darker, maybe even a black. So we have option 1, option 2, and option 3. I absolutely adore option 1. I think it's one of the most beautiful ones I have, which is why I don't actually want to use it for this purpose. So I think I'm going to go with option 3 because it's a bit thicker and feels more in proportion with the size of this board. Now I need to go find this piece of wood in my stash. I'm going to cut up the lengths on the miter saw, and then I'm going to glue the corners together with just normal wood glue and tape the corners up to get them nice and tight. Okay, I have learned that my framing skills leave a lot to be desired, and I shall be doing some actual research before I take this on next time. But let's check that this fits in the frame. Beautiful. Last item of the day is painting this. We are marking this as a very successful day, and we'll be back tomorrow to unclamp this desk. Okay, something very bad just happened. One of my calls got glued on. It's absolutely wrecked the veneer there. I was going to cut out a section from around here for cable management, and then I was going to get an extra bit to kind of slot in its place, and we'll just do that there. So it's okay. It's going to be okay. While that glue up was drying, I focused on that bit where the veneer had chipped out before. I've made this little insert that's really nice. It's rounded, it's veneered, and I managed to get a color match pretty nicely, but the direction of the grain is a little wrong. Hopefully you won't be able to notice that. Also, it's at the back of the desk where the cables are running, so you won't be looking at it too closely, but I did want to make it cute because it's the only like defining feature of this desk at this point. I'm going to add a round over to the top and bottom of this front edge, and then we need to trim the back and oil it, and then it'll be ready to take home. I spent the last week doing coving all the way around the rest of this room, and B has officially banned me from doing any more coving. We're going to have to hire that out for the rest of the house because I'm not very good at it and it's really tiring. But anyway, I got everything back from the workshop to install, and we've had a couple mishaps. Installing the shelves has not gone great. The brackets I used are just really wobbly. This is a dot and dab wall, so there is quite a big gap between the plasterboard and the actual brick wall behind it. I know I could try taking them out and using more heavy duty hardware, but I just feel icky about the floating shelf thing. I just have a real sense that it's not going to work for me, but that's okay. I've come up with an alternative solution. We'll get back to that. I also mounted the monitor on this cool swiveling arm so I can move it around. Oh, don't pull it too far because the cables will come out of my little cable management thing. But that's really cool. And I added some LEDs around the back so it can provide some ambient light in this corner for winter times, which is really nice. Putting the desk in went very well, apart from I split this one tiny baton at the back, so I'm going to have to redo that. But I'm really, really happy with the fit and the height and this everything. It's glorious. And I've also hung this little pinboard. The last bits to show you before we head back to the workshop to fix the shelf problem and build one more DIY is that I swapped out the chair for this desk. That old one was looking really ratty, but I bought this one. This is the human scale world different chair from one of those office consignment stores. So it cost me like a quarter of the price of getting it new. This also plays off the black of the fireplace and of that frame there and just fits into this corner much more nicely. And technically not part of this corner's transformation, but we're counting it in this video. I've also swapped out the rug in this room and the light fixture. They're both pretty bold and pretty modern and not what I would usually go for. The rug is from Ruggable's collaboration with the Home Edit. I like Ruggable rugs for in here especially because the dogs play a lot in here, and also it's a shallow enough profile that this chair can slide over it easily. I know people say go neutral and simple with rugs, but I really wanted to bring much more pattern into the space, and I was struggling to find a way to bring that kind of large scale pattern in. It's way too late to return it now, so hopefully I like it. And the light was a cheap marketplace find. I was planning on spray painting the outside, but I think it might tie in nicely to the rug, so I'm gonna leave it as is for now. Now let's head back to the workshop and I will show you my idea for some fancy brackets to fix these shelves. To give the shelves more stability, I'm going to make some brackets that I will mount to the sides of the alcove that the shelves can then sit on. I drew out a whole bunch of different designs for this, and I ended up with this one that I have now printed out to scale. I freehand drew these curves, so they're not perfect, but I really like the shape of this. It's the right amount of decorative and simple. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to spray mount this piece of paper to this bit of scrap MDF, and I'm going to cut this on my bandsaw and get it as perfect as possible, sand it down, make sure it's exactly the shape I want, and then I'm going to take these leftover pieces from the shelves and rough cut them on the bandsaw to shape, and then I will be able to use this templating router bit and my template to get them to all match perfectly. Making these brackets last week went so well. I also pre-drilled them and primed them so they're ready to install. It just blows my mind that I can draw a shape on my tablet and then a day later have 6 perfect copies of it in wood. I just kind of want to wax lyrical about my tools for a minute. The bandsaw, like I could not have made these without the bandsaw. And when I bought the bandsaw for the whole veneering debacle, B was really questioning how useful it would be in my shop, and it's opened up so many possibilities for me. Also, this templating bit, I didn't really explain how this works the other day, but it is a straight cutter with a little bearing at the top. So as long as you can line your bearing up with your template, it will cut whatever material is underneath it to the exact same shape. Okay, enough tool praise. Let's talk about the plan for today and the final project I'm going to make for this space. In the corner of B's desk lies a sad white plastic IKEA box, and I want to build a very pretty desk organizer to go in its place. The requirements are it needs to have some sort of slot for post, it needs to have some sort of hidden compartment for like cables and odds and ends, and ideally also a spot for either a candle or like their water bottle or a cup of tea. I drew up a couple of ideas and this is the design I've settled on. I am not totally in love with it, but it does fulfill all of the needs and hopefully won't be too tricky to make. I'm going to make the main body of it out of more of that walnut MDF, and then the top I'm hopefully going to be able to make out of solid walnut. And also I want to do this entire project today, so I better get going. I'm back at it with my rubbish paper models. I had no idea what dimensions I wanted this to be, so I've just mocked it up in some very, very flimsy paper. I think I'm going to take about 2 centimeters off the depth and then it will be all good. On the table saw, I cut one long strip that will be used for the front and the sides, as well as pieces for the back and the base. I added curved corners to the back using the bandsaw, and then I edge banded the back and the long strip before I cut it into the front and the sides. I set the table saw at a 45-degree angle so I can miter the front and the sides together, which will leave a continuous grain across the front of the box and will make some nice neat corners. Before I glued the pieces together, I added tape anywhere I didn't want the glue to go, which leaves me with minimal cleanup. As you come to expect with my glue ups, I had a bit of panic with the clamping situation, but the box looks really good. I'm really happy with those mitered corners, and yeah, I think it's going to turn out really well. I also wanted to make the top today, but I'm feeling a little off, like I just don't want to do it, which for me usually means that a fatigue crash is incoming. So I think I'm going to put this down, get myself home and on the sofa, and we'll come back another day to finish this project. The transformation has occurred from the very, very thin wood to the proper wood. I'm absolutely chuffed with this. Would you believe this is the first box I've ever made? And the glue up went really well. These front miter joints are really tight. I did drop the back plate on the floor at one point, so it has a dent in the most visible place, but overall, I am really very happy with this. And then today, I made the lid. I milled up this piece of walnut on the table saw, and then I also used the table saw to cut this little lip on the inside. And then I had to figure out how I was going to make this little divot for the candle. To make such a small, shallow circle, I first had to cut out a tiny jig that I could use inside of the jig so that I wouldn't have to drill a hole down in the middle. But it has come out really well and will fit a candle, and will also just about fit one of my mugs. It looks kind of like a tea shrine like that, which is a bit strange, but I think when you have a candle in it, it'll make a lot more sense. The last thing to do for this piece is to finish it. I'm going to be using some Rubio monocoat, which is what we use for all of our kitchen cabinets, but it's quite hard to get in the UK. I think the equivalent we have here is Osmo oil. I have since bought some Osmo oil to oil our doors, but this just guarantees that you only need one coat, and there's something about that that just seems so efficient. Project complete. This is so cute. I can't believe how different the colors came out. This I think is American walnut veneer, and this is French walnut, although maybe I just picked a slightly lighter area from the slab, but I quite like the contrast it makes. So now I'm going to take this home. I'm going to take all those shelf brackets and install them, and then we have to do a bunch of little finishing touches, and I will see you for the grand reveal of the space. And there we have it. I am very happy with how all of this came out, despite all of the pivots we had to make along the way. Although making every single aspect of this myself is not a sustainable strategy if I want to finish this house within the next 10 years. So I think I'm going to probably tamp down on that a bit in future makeovers, but this was wonderful. If you'd like to see Bee's reaction to their new workspace, you can join us on the after show on Patreon. And otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.